They laughed when he showed them his work. Not just a few people, almost everyone. They stared at his paintings like they were jokes. Some couldn't even hide their laughter. Others just gave him that look, the one that says, "You really think this is art?" He stood there quietly, holding his canvas, pretending not to care. But deep down it stung. Every laugh, every comment, every whisper, it cut through him. All he ever wanted was to express what he felt inside. But the world didn't see what he saw. They called it messy. They said it looked like a child's drawing. "This isn't real art," someone once said to his face. First, he tried to explain. He tried to tell them that his work had meaning, that every brushstroke came from a deep place. But no one listened. They had already decided. He was just wasting his time. Still, he kept going. Not because he believed he was a genius, but because he couldn't stop. Something inside him wouldn't let him quit. He didn't paint for fame or money. He painted because he had to. At home, his room was filled with canvas after canvas. Some were colorful and loud. Others were dark and silent. All of them told a story, his story. But they just sat there, stacked in corners, waiting to be seen. Sometimes, even he wondered if it was worth it. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking himself the same question over and over. Asterisk, what if they're right? What if I'm just fooling myself? Asterisk, but every morning, he picked up the brush again. There was no big break. No sudden spotlight. Just silence. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The laughter never really stopped. Even on the street, people who knew him would joke, "Hey, Picasso, sold anything yet?" He smiled back. Pretended it didn't matter. But it did. Still, he kept painting. He posted his work online. Most of the time, no one reacted. Maybe 1 or 2 likes. Comment if he was lucky. But most people just scrolled past. Like his work didn't even exist. He started to doubt again. Maybe the world didn't need his kind of art. Maybe his style was too strange, too raw. He had no formal training, no rich background, no famous connections. Just a passion that felt more like a curse. But then something changed. Not big, not dramatic. Just one small moment. One post got shared. A small art blog picked it up. It wasn't a major site. Just a quiet corner of the internet. But someone saw it. Someone who understood. That one person sent a message. They didn't laugh. They didn't ask if it was a joke. They asked how much. It was the first time anyone had asked that question. And with that question, everything began to shift. But before all of that, there was the silence. The rejection. The loneliness. The nights of painting with no praise. The days of doubt with no answers. Before the world saw his art as valuable, they saw it as a mistake. And he lived with that. For a long time. He wasn't born into art. There were no galleries, no expensive tools, no classes. Just pencils, old notebooks, and the urge to draw, anytime, anywhere. As a kid, he would sketch on the back of school papers, on napkins, even on walls when no one was watching. He didn't think of it as art. It was just something that made him feel alive. But even in childhood, people noticed he was different. Not in a way that earned praise. More like quiet stares and shaking heads. His drawings didn't look like what the other kids made. He didn't color inside the lines. His characters had strange shapes, odd expressions. His teachers told him to follow instructions. Art has rules, they said. He heard that a lot. At home, it wasn't much different. His parents weren't cruel, but they were practical. They worried. "You can't live off this," his father would say. "It's not a real future." His mother would smile gently, then suggest he study harder in science or math. "You're smart. Be a doctor. An engineer." That's what people respect. But respect wasn't what he was chasing. He just wanted to be heard. Through colors, lines, movement. Every time he tried to explain, the words got stuck. So he drew instead. In high school, he joined the art club. For a moment, he thought maybe things would change. But even there, he felt out of place. The others copied pictures from books or followed exact instructions. Their work was clean, pretty, safe. His art was none of that. It made people uncomfortable. Some students snickered behind his back. One even told him his drawings looked like something a 5-year-old would do. That comment stayed with him. Not because it hurt, but because he had heard it before, from different mouths in different ways. Over and over. Still, he kept drawing. When it came time to apply to college, he took a risk. He sent his portfolio to art schools. It wasn't polished. It wasn't filled with still life paintings or portraits. It was raw, full of emotion, full of chaos. Just like him. Most of the replies came back the same. Thank you for applying. Unfortunately, your style does not meet our requirements. Some didn't even bother to explain. Each rejection felt like a door slamming shut. He thought about quitting. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he should pick a real career. Maybe it was time to grow up. But every time he tried to stop, something pulled him back. He worked odd jobs to support himself. Waiter, store clerk, delivery guy. He came home tired, feet aching, hands sore. But he always painted at night. It was the only thing that made the noise in his head go quiet. He couldn't afford expensive paints or big canvases. So he used whatever he found. Cardboard, scrap wood, even broken mirrors. He turned trash into something that meant something. Most nights, he painted alone. No feedback, no applause. Just the sound of brushes scratching the surface and the beating of his own heart. Sometimes, he would stare at his work for hours, wondering if it mattered at all. He'd think about all the people who had told him he wasn't good enough. Their voices played in his mind like a broken record. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. It was the only thing he truly had. He remembered the exact day the message came. It was late at night. He had just finished another piece. Rough, emotional, full of sharp lines and heavy color. He stared at it, unsure. Was it good? Was it trash? He didn't know anymore. Still, he took a photo and posted it online. No filter. No long caption. Just a quiet post, like hundreds before it. Then he forgot about it. The next morning, his phone buzzed. 1 notification. Then 2. Then 5. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But it wasn't. Someone had shared his post. A small art blog. Nothing fancy. Just a low-follow page that featured weird and unknown artists. And somehow, people liked it. Not a lot. But more than usual. He stared at the screen, not knowing what to feel. Then came the message. It was short. Just a few lines. Someone wrote, "I saw your piece. It moved me. Is it for sale?" He read it again. And again. He had never sold anything before. No one had ever asked. He didn't even know how to price it. Part of him thought it was a prank. But he replied. He said yes, it was for sale. The buyer offered $500. He couldn't believe it. $500 for something people once called childish. He packaged it carefully, hands shaking. It felt unreal. When he dropped it off at the post office, he walked out with a strange feeling in his chest. Not joy, not pride, just shock. He thought it was a one-time thing. A lucky moment. But a few days later, someone else messaged him. Then another. Some just wanted to say his work made them feel something. Others asked if he had more pieces. For the first time, people weren't laughing. They were curious. They were listening. He didn't suddenly become famous. It was slow, quiet, but steady. People started to follow him. Not hundreds, but dozens. Then those dozens became hundreds. And with every new post, his confidence grew. He didn't change his style. He didn't try to make it more normal. In fact, he made it even more personal. He stopped caring what others thought. He painted what he felt. No rules. No filters. Just truth. Some pieces were messy and loud. Others were soft and quiet. But each one told a story. His story. A few months later, he got invited to show his work in a small gallery. Nothing fancy. A small room in the back of a cafe. But it was his first real exhibition. He hung his paintings with care. He didn't expect much. Maybe a few people would stop by. But by the end of the night, 3 pieces had sold. One for $800, another for $200. He stood there, speechless. The same art people once mocked was now being bought. Not because of hype, not because of trends, but because it touched something in people. Word started to spread. Slowly but surely. Art blogs featured his story. Other artists reached out. Even critics who once ignored him began to take interest. One day, a collector contacted him. A well-known name. He wanted to buy not 1, but 5 pieces. That's when it hit him. Something had changed. Not because the world had become kinder, but because he never gave up. And now, the same hands that once held shaky brushes were signing contracts. The same eyes that once cried in the dark were reading messages of praise. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time, he wasn't walking alone. His apartment was still small. Still quiet. Still filled with unfinished canvases and half-dried brushes. But something had changed. His inbox wasn't empty anymore. His posts didn't go unnoticed. And when he looked at his hands, stained with paint, he didn't see failure. He saw proof. He was selling art. Real art. And not just once or twice. It was happening again and again. At first, the prices were small. A few $100s. Sometimes a little more. But as months passed, the numbers climbed. People started calling his work bold, emotional, honest. The same work they once laughed at. He didn't know how to react. He wasn't used to compliments. For so long, all he knew was silence or rejection. But now, there were emails from collectors, comments from fans, requests for commissions. One painting sold for $5,000. He stared at the message for a long time, trying to believe it was real. That someone out there saw that much value in what came from his heart. More invitations followed. Small galleries. Then bigger ones. Each event brought new eyes to his work. Some people still didn't get it. Some still walked past without a second glance. But others stopped, looked, felt. One woman cried in front of one of his paintings. She said it reminded her of a time in her life she had tried to forget. She didn't buy it. She just said thank you. And that, somehow, meant more than any sale. He was no longer the artist people mocked. Now, his name was being spoken in rooms he once dreamed of entering. Art critics started writing about him. They called his style raw expressionism, though he never thought of it that way. He wasn't trying to fit into any box. He was just telling the truth with color. His social media grew. Not with millions of followers, but with people who genuinely cared. They weren't just liking photos. They were reading his words, sharing his journey. Then came the big one. A well-known gallery in New York contacted him. They wanted to showcase 10 pieces. 10. He had never even been to New York. He worked for weeks, barely sleeping. Not because he had to, but because he wanted every piece to speak. Not shout. Not impress. Just speak. At the exhibition, he stood in the corner, quiet, watching. People walked in. Some nodded. Some stared. One by one, the red dots appeared next to the paintings. Sold. 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 One buyer offered $50,000 for a piece that had been sitting in his apartment for over a year. He almost didn't bring it. He didn't jump or cheer. He just stood there, feeling the moment. He thought about every time he was told to stop. Every time someone laughed. Every night he wondered if this dream was pointless. Now people were flying across countries just to see what he had created. But he wasn't thinking about fame. Or money. He was thinking about the next painting. About the next story. Because that's what it had always been about. Not success. Not revenge. Just honesty. His art had found its place. And he had found his voice. He used to walk past art galleries with his head down. Now, he was being welcomed through their front doors. The same person who once stood outside, wondering if his work would ever matter, was now the artist people came to see. Not because of fame. Not because of hype. But because his paintings made people feel something they couldn't explain. They said his style was wild, hard to define. And that's exactly why it worked. There were no clean edges, no perfect shapes, just emotion, raw and honest. He didn't paint what people wanted to see. He painted what was inside. And somehow, that connected with strangers all over the world. Celebrities began reaching out. Some posted photos of his art hanging in their homes. A famous actor called him a genius in disguise. A singer requested a private commission, offering more money than he had ever imagined. Each new message felt surreal. For years he had been invisible. Now he was being called a visionary. But he didn't let it go to his head. He stayed grounded. He still painted in that same small room, still wore paint-stained clothes, still used music to guide each brushstroke. He didn't hire a team. He answered his own emails. He packaged his own work. Fame didn't change his process. If anything, it made him more focused. He started donating some of his earnings. Quietly. No announcements. He gave to kids who loved art but had no supplies. To small schools with no art classes. He remembered what it felt like to be that kid, full of dreams and surrounded by doubt. If he could be someone's first yes in a world full of no's, then it was all worth it. Interviews started coming in. Reporters wanted to know how he did it. How he went from being laughed at to becoming a name in the art world. He never had a simple answer. He didn't follow a plan. He just didn't stop. Even when no one cared. Even when everyone said to quit. His face stayed out of the spotlight. He never wanted to be famous. Just understood. In a world where people chase attention, he chased meaning. That's what made him different. One of his old classmates messaged him out of the blue. The same one who once laughed at his art in school. This time, the message was different. I saw your work. I get it now. I'm sorry for not seeing it before. He didn't reply right away. He just stared at the words, unsure how to feel. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about the quiet power of staying true to yourself, even when the world turns its back. His parents, once full of worry, were now his biggest fans. They didn't always understand his work, but they respected it. They respected him. His mother framed one of his earliest drawings, the one he almost threw away. She said it reminded her of who he was before the world tried to change him. Every painting still took time. Still carried weight. He didn't rush. Didn't create just for profit. Each piece had to mean something. If it didn't, he wouldn't sign it. People began saying his name with respect. Not as a joke. Not as a curiosity. But as an artist. Someone who had walked through the fire and came out not bitter, but brighter. And every time someone asked, "How did you make it?" he would give the same answer. "I didn't make it. I just didn't stop." There were moments now when he would just sit in his studio, staring at the walls covered in paint splatters and memories. Some days were still quiet. Some nights still long. But everything felt different. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt earned. Like a calm after the storm. His paintings were now in homes across the world. New York, Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. He had never been to most of these places, but his art had. And somehow that was enough. His stories had traveled farther than he ever thought he would. Collectors now waited for months to get a piece. His name appeared in art magazines, beside names he once studied with awe. He still couldn't believe it sometimes. Not because he doubted his ability, but because the journey had been so long, so filled with rejection, that success felt like a dream he had woken into. One of his most talked about pieces was created in the middle of a panic attack. He had been up all night, unable to breathe, heart racing, thoughts loud. He grabbed his brush not to make art, but to survive the feeling. He didn't plan it. He didn't think about color or form. He just let the storm spill onto the canvas. It sold for $50,000. When people asked him what it meant, he never gave a full answer. Not because he was being mysterious, but because he wanted them to feel it for themselves. That was the point of his work. Not to explain, but to awaken. Some buyers wanted to meet him in person. They expected someone loud, confident, maybe even eccentric. Instead, they met a quiet man with tired eyes and ink on his fingers. A man who still got nervous speaking to strangers. A man who still second-guessed his work, even after all the praise. He didn't pretend to be more than he was. He didn't need to. The art spoke loud enough. Once, during an interview, the host asked him, "What do you think your younger self would say if he saw you now?" He paused for a long time, then smiled. "He'd probably cry," he said, "and then ask me if it's real." Because it still didn't feel real, not completely. Even after the exhibitions, the sold-out shows, the six-figure offers, there was still that small part of him, the boy who was told his drawings were nonsense, who sat alone at lunch, sketching monsters and dreams in the margins of his notebook. That boy was still inside him. And maybe that's why the art never lost its soul. He visited his old school once. Just walked the halls quietly. The classrooms seemed smaller, the walls less intimidating. He peeked into the old art room, the same one where he was once told, "Maybe art isn't your path." But now, on the wall outside, there was a framed photo of him. Alumni spotlight. Right beside it, one of his prints. A student walked by and whispered, "That's him." He didn't say anything, just smiled and kept walking. He never posted about that day. Never shared the photo. Some moments are too personal for the internet. Too sacred for likes or shares. His life had changed, yes. But he hadn't. He still painted late at night, with music low and windows open. He still felt nervous every time he finished a piece. Still wondered if it was enough. Still doubted. Still believed. And somewhere out there, someone else, just like he once was sitting in a small room, painting through the silence. Some people think success comes like lightning. Fast, loud, bright. But for him, it was quiet, slow. Like rain filling a glass, drop by drop. It took years of silence, years of being ignored, before anything changed. But that's how real things grow, without noise. He never painted for fame. That part just happened. What he really wanted was connection. Not attention, not claps, not a crowd. Just that feeling of being understood without saying a word. That's what painting gave him. A way to speak without speaking. A way to breathe when the world felt too loud. There were still people who didn't get it. Still critics who rolled their eyes. But it didn't bother him anymore. Because he finally understood something that took him years to learn. Not everyone will get your voice. But the right people will. And those are the ones who matter. He didn't look at his work and see money. He looked at it and saw pain turned into purpose. Fear turned into fire. Doubt turned into something that now hung in someone's home, making them feel less alone. That was the reward. Not the price tag. Not the praise. Just the quiet truth that he had turned all the broken pieces into something beautiful. Some nights, he would scroll back through his old posts. Posts with 1 like, 2 likes, no comments. He used to hate those days. Now he smiled at them. Because those posts were proof that he kept going, even when no one cared. Especially when no one cared. He began writing small notes at the back of each painting. Not big, not fancy. Just a sentence or two. Sometimes it was a quote. Sometimes it was a question. Sometimes it was a message to whoever would own the piece. He never told buyers about the notes. Some found them, some didn't. But they were always there. Like a secret handshake between souls. He started receiving letters. Real letters. Handwritten. Mailed across the world. People told him how his work helped them through loss, heartbreak, depression. One woman wrote, "Your painting is the only thing that made me feel something after my brother died." He kept that letter in a box. He never replied. But he read it every time he doubted himself. Because even now, the doubt never fully leaves. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe doubt keeps you honest. Keeps you grounded. Keeps you creating from a place that's real. He didn't want to be remembered as a legend or a genius or a success story. He wanted to be remembered as someone who stayed true. Who didn't change for likes or trends. Who kept creating when no one believed he should. There was a message hidden in his journey. Not written in words, but in everything he had lived. And if you listened closely, you could hear it. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be accepted right away. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to keep going. That's what he did. Through the silence. Through the laughter. through the rejections, through the fear. He kept going. And now, his story hangs on walls he once dreamed of walking past. His name is spoken by people who once didn't know he existed. His art, once laughed at, now speaks for those who have no words. And somewhere, someone out there, with a brush in their hand and doubt in their chest, might hear this story and decide not to give up. Not today.